Hello, and welcome back to Storytime with Eric Zimmer, where we last left off in James and the Giant Peach. We found our hero stuck out in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, and James came up with the idea of attaching seagulls with silk to the stem of the peach to get them to fly out of the ocean. And it worked, although it did took them exactly 502 seagulls to do it. But at last, they're safe. You ready? Let's see what happens next. Alright, let's begin. Chapter 23. In a flash, everybody was up on top. "Oh, isn't it beautiful?" they cried. "What a marvelous feeling. Goodbye, sharks. Oh boy, this is the way to travel." Miss Spider, who was literally squealing with excitement, grabbed the centipede by the waist, and the two of them started dancing around and around the peach stem together. I wonder if that's why there was some romance between them in the movie. Who knows? The earthworm stood up on his tail and did a sort of wriggle of joy all by himself. The old green grasshopper kept hopping higher and higher in the air. The ladybug rushed over and shook James warmly by the hand. The glowworm, who at the best of times was a very shy and silent creature, sat glowing with pleasure near the tunnel entrance. Even the silkworm, looking white and thin and completely exhausted, came creeping out of the tunnel to watch this miraculous ascent. Up and up they went, and soon they were as high as the top of a church steeple above the ocean. "I'm a bit worried about the peach," James said to the others as soon as all the dancing and the shouting had stopped. "I wonder how much damage those sharks have done to it underneath. It's quite impossible to tell from up here." "It looks like they did no damage whatsoever. And that's saying something, because there's like 20 sharks down there in the illustration." "Why don't I go over the side and make an inspection?" Miss Spider said. "It'll be no trouble at all, I assure you." And without waiting for an answer, she quickly produced a length of silk thread and attached the end of it to the peach stem. "I'll be back in a jiffy," she said, and then she walked calmly over the edge of the peach and jumped off, paying out the thread behind her as she fell. The others crowded anxiously around the place where she had gone over. "Wouldn't it be dreadful if that thread broke?" the ladybug said. There was a rather long silence. "Are you all right, Miss Spider?" shouted the old green grasshopper. "Yes, thank you," her voice answered from below. "I'm coming up now." And up she came, climbing foot over foot up the silk thread, and at the same time tucking the thread back cleverly into her body as she climbed past it. "Is it awful?" they asked her. "Is it all eaten away? Are there great holes in it everywhere?" The spider clambered back onto the deck with a pleased but also rather puzzled look on her face. "You won't believe this," she said, but actually there is hardly any damage down there at all. The peach is almost untouched. There are just a few tiny pieces out of it here and there, but nothing more." "You must be mistaken," James told her. "Of course she's mistaken," the centipede said. "I promise you I'm not," Miss Spider answered. "But there were hundreds of sharks around us. They churned the water into a froth. We saw their great mouths opening and shutting." "I don't care what you saw," Miss Spider answered. "They certainly didn't do much damage to the peach." "Then why did we start sinking?" the centipede asked. "Perhaps we didn't start sinking," the old green grasshopper suggested. "Perhaps we were all so frightened that we simply imagined it." This, in point of fact, was closer to the truth than any of them knew. A shark, you see, has an extremely long, sharp nose, and its mouth is set very awkwardly underneath its face and a long way back. This makes it more or less impossible for it to get its teeth into a vast, smooth, curving surface such as the side of a peach. Even if the creature turns onto its back, it still can't do it, because the nose always gets in the way. If you have ever seen a small dog trying to get its teeth into an enormous ball, then you will be able to imagine roughly how it was with the sharks and the peach. "It must have been some kind of magic," the ladybug said. "The holes must have healed up by themselves." "Oh, look, there's a ship below us," shouted James. Everybody rushed to the side and peered over. None of them had ever seen a ship before. It looks like a big one. It's got 3 funnels. You can't even see the people on the decks. Let's wave to them. Do you think they can see us? Neither James nor any of the others knew it. But the ship that was now passing beneath them was actually the Queen Mary sailing out of the English Channel on her way to America. And on the bridge of the Queen Mary, the astonished captain was standing with a group of his officers, all of them gaping at the great round ball hovering overhead. "I don't like it," the captain said. "Nor do I," said the first officer. "Do you think it's following us?" said the second officer. "I tell you I don't like it," muttered the captain. "It could be dangerous," the first officer said. "That's it!" cried the captain. "It's a secret weapon. Holy cats! Send a message to the Queen at once. The country must be warned, and give me my telescope." The first officer handed the telescope to the captain. The captain put it to his eye. "There's birds everywhere," he cried. "The whole sky is teeming with birds. What in the world are they doing? And wait a second. There are people on it. I can see them moving. There's do I have this darned thing focused right? It looks like a little boy in short trousers. Yes, I can distinctly see a little boy in short trousers standing up there. And there's a sort of giant ladybug." "Now just a minute, Captain," the first officer said. "And a colossal green grasshopper." "Captain," the first officer said sharply. "Captain, please, and a mammoth spider." "Oh dear, he's been at the whiskey again," whispered the second officer. "And a simply enormous centipede," screamed the captain. "Call the ship's doctor," the first officer said. "Our captain is not well." A moment later, the great round ball disappeared into a cloud, and the people on the ship never saw it again. Chapter 24. But up on the beach itself, everyone was still happy and excited. I wonder where we'll finish up this time," the Earthworm said. "Who cares?" they answered. "Seagulls always go back to the land sooner or later." Up and up they went. High above the highest clouds, the peach swaying gently from side to side as it floated along. "Wouldn't this be a perfect time for a little music?" the ladybug asked. "How about it, old green grasshopper?" With pleasure, dear lady," said the old green grasshopper answered, bowing from the waist. "Oh, hooray, he's going to play for us," they cried, and immediately the whole company sat themselves down in a circle around the old green musician, and the concert began. From the moment that the first note was struck, the audience became completely spellbound. And as for James, never had he heard such beautiful music as this. In the garden at home on summer evenings, he had listened many times to the sound of grasshoppers chirping in the grass, and he had always liked the noise that they made. But this was a different kind of noise altogether. This was real music. Chords, harmonies, tunes, and all the rest of it. And what a wonderful instrument the old green grasshopper was playing on. It was like a violin. It was almost exactly as though he were playing upon a violin. The bow of the violin, the part that moved, was his back leg. The strings of the violin, the part that made the sound, was the wedge of his wing. He was using only the top of his back leg, the thigh, and he was stroking this up and down against the edge of his wing with incredible skill, sometimes slowly, sometimes fast, but always with the same easy-flowing action. It was precisely the way a clever violinist would have used his bow, and the music came pouring out and filled the whole blue sky around them with magic melodies. When the first part was finished, everyone clapped madly, and Miss Spider stood up and shouted, "Bravo! Encore! Give us some more!" "Did you like that, James?" the old green grasshopper asked, smiling at the small boy. "Oh, I loved it," James answered. "It was beautiful. It was as though you had a real violin in your hands." "A real violin?" the old green grasshopper cried. "Good heavens, I like that. My dear boy, I am a real violin. It is part of my own body. But do all grasshoppers play their music on violins, the same way as you do?" James asked him. "No," he answered, "not all. If you want to know, I happen to be a short-horned grasshopper. I have 2 short feelers coming out of my head. Can you see them? There they are. They are quite short, aren't they? That's why they call me a shorthorn. And we shorthorns are the only ones who play our music in the violin style, using a bow. My long-horned relatives, the ones who have long, curvy feelers coming out of their heads, make their music simply by rubbing the edges of their 2 top wings together. They are not violinists, they are ring rubbers. And a rather inferior noise these ring rubbers produce too, if I may say so. It sounds more like a banjo than a fiddle. How fascinating this all is, cried James. And to think that up until now I had never even wondered how a grasshopper made his sounds. My dear young fellow, the old green grasshopper said gently, there are a whole lot of things in this world of ours that you haven't started wondering about yet. Where, for example, do you think I keep my ears? Your ears? Why, in your head, of course. Everyone burst out laughing. You mean you don't even know that? Cried the centipede. Try again, said the old green grasshopper, smiling at James. You can't possibly keep them anywhere else. Oh, can't I? Well, I give up. Where do you keep them? Right here, the old green grasshopper said, one on each side of my tummy. It's not true. Of course it's true. What's so peculiar about that? You ought to see where my cousins, the crickets and the katydids, keep theirs. Where do they keep them? In their legs. One on each front leg, just below the knee. You mean you didn't know that either? The centipede said scornfully. You're joking, James said. Nobody could possibly have his ears in his legs. Why not? Because it's ridiculous, that's why. You know what I think is ridiculous, the centipede said, grinning away as usual. I don't mean to be rude, but I think it is ridiculous to have ears on the sides of one's head. It certainly looks ridiculous. No, it doesn't. You ought to take a peek in the mirror some day and see for yourself. Pest, cried the earthworm. Why must you always be so rude and impunctious to everyone? You ought to apologize to James at once. Chapter 25. James didn't want the earthworm and the centipede to get into an argument, and nor do I. So he said quickly to the earthworm, Tell me, do you play any kind of music? No, but I do other things, some of which are really quite extraordinary, the earthworm said, brightening. Such as what? Asked James. Well, the earthworm said, next time you stand in a field or in a garden and look around you, just remember this. That every grain of soil upon the surface of the land, every tiny little bit of soil that you see, has actually passed through the body of an earthworm during the last few years. Isn't that wonderful? It's not possible, said James. My dear boy, it's a fact. You mean you actually swallow soil? Like mad, the earthworm said proudly, in one end and out the other. But what's the point? What do you mean, what's the point? Why do you do it? We do it for the farmers. It makes the soil nice and light and crumbly so things will grow well in it. If you really want to know, the farmers couldn't do without us. We are essential. We are vital. So it is only natural that the farmer should love us. He loves us even more, I believe, than he loves the ladybug. The ladybug, said James, turning to look at her. Do they love you too? Well, Eric Carle does. Hence why he wrote The Grouchy Ladybug. I am told that they do, the ladybug answered modestly, blushing all over. In fact, I understand that in some places the farmers love us so much that they go out and buy live ladybugs by the sackful and take them home and set them free in their fields. They are very pleased when they have lots of ladybugs in their fields. But why? James asked. Because we gobble up all the nasty little insects that are gobbling up all the farmers' crops. It helps enormously, and we ourselves don't charge a penny for our services. I think you're wonderful, James told her. Can I ask you one special question? Please do. Well, is it really true that I can tell how old an ladybug is by counting her spots? Oh no, that's just a children's story, the ladybug said. We never change our spots. Some of us, of course, are born with more spots than others, but we never change them. The number of spots on it that a ladybug has is simply a way of showing which branch of the family she belongs to. I, for example, as you can see for yourself, am a 9-spotted ladybug. I am very lucky. It is a fine thing to be. It is indeed, said James, gazing at the beautiful scarlet shell with the 9 black spots on it. On the other hand, the ladybug went on, some of my less fortunate relatives have no more than 2 spots altogether on their shells. Can you imagine that? They are called 2-spotted ladybugs, and very common and ill-mannered they are, I regret to say. And then, of course, you have the 5-spotted ladybugs as well. They are much nicer than the 2-spotted ones, although I myself find them a trifle too saucy for my taste. But they are all of them loved? Said James. Yes, the ladybug answered quietly. They are all of them loved. It seems that almost everyone around here is loved, said James. How nice is this? Not me, cried the centipede happily. I am a pest, and I'm proud of it. I am such a shocking, dreadful pest. Hear, hear, the earthworm said. Oh. But what about you, Miss Spider? Asked James. Aren't you also much loved in the world? Alas, no, Miss Spider answered, sighing long and loud. I am not loved at all, and yet I do nothing but good. All day long I catch flies and mosquitoes in my webs. I am a decent person. I know you are, said James. It is very unfair the way we spiders are treated, Miss Spider went on. Why, only last week your own horrible Aunt Sponge flushed my poor dear father down the plug hole in the bathtub. Oh, how awful, cried James. I watched the whole thing from the corner up in the ceiling, Miss Spider murmured. It was ghastly. We never saw him again. A large tear rolled down her cheek and fell with a splash on the floor. But it is not very unlucky to kill a spider, James inquired, looking around at the others. Of course it's unlucky to kill a spider, shouted the centipede. It's about the unluckiest thing anyone can do. But look what happened to Aunt Sponge after she'd done that. Bump! We all felt it, didn't we, as the peach went over her? Oh, what a lovely bump that must have been for you, Miss Spider. It was very satisfactory, Miss Spider answered. Will you sing us a song about it, please? So the centipede did. And Sponge was terrifically fat, and tremendously flabby at that. Her tummy and waist were as soggy as paste. It was worse than on the place where she sat. So she said, I must make myself flat. I must make myself sleek as a cat. I shall do without dinner to make myself thinner. But along came the peach, oh the beautiful peach, and made her far thinner than that. That was very nice, Miss Spider said. Now sing one about Aunt Spiker. With pleasure, said the centipede, grinning. And Spiker was as thin as a wire, and as dry as a bone, only drier. She was so long and thin, if you carried her in, you could use her for poking the fire. I must do something quickly, she frowned. I want fat, I want pound upon pound. I must eat lots and lots of marshmallows and chalks till I start bulging out all around. Ah, yes, she announced, I have sworn, that I'll alter my figure by dawn. Cried the peach with a snigger, I'll alter your figure, and ironed her out on the lawn. Everybody clapped and called out for more songs from the centipede, who had once launched into his favorite song of all. Once upon a time, when pigs were swine, and monkeys chewed tobacco, and hens took snuff to make themselves tough, and the ducks said quack, quack, quacko, and porcupines drank fiery rinds, and goats ate tapioca, and old Mother Hubbard got stuck in the cupboard. Look out, centipede, cried James, look out! Chapter 26. The centipede, who had begun dancing wildly around the deck during the song, had suddenly gone too close to the downward curving edge of the peach, and for 3 awful seconds he stood teetering on the brink, swinging his legs frantically in circles in an effort to stop himself from falling over backward into space. But before anyone could reach him, down he went. He gave a shriek of terror as he fell, and the others, rushing to the side and peering over, saw his poor long body tumbling over and over through the air, getting smaller and smaller until it was out of sight. Silkworm! Yelled James. Quick! Start spinning! The silkworm sighed, for she was still very tired from spinning all that silk for the seagulls, but she did as she was told. I'm going down after him, cried James, grabbing the silk string as it started coming out of the silkworm and tying the end of it around his waist. The rest of you hold on to Silkworm so I don't pull over with me, and later on if you feel 3 tugs on the string, start hauling me up again. He jumped, and he went tumbling down after the centipede, down, 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 towards the sea below, and you can imagine how quickly the silkworm had to spin to keep up with the speed of his fall. "We shall never see either of them again," cried the ladybug. Oh dear, just when we were all so happy too." The spider, the glowworm, and the ladybug all began to cry. So did the earthworm. "I don't care a bit about the centipede," the earthworm sobbed. "But I really did love that little boy." Very softly, the old green grasshopper started to play the funeral march on his violin, and by the time he had finished, everyone, including himself, was in a flood of tears. Suddenly there came 3 sharp tugs on the rope. "Pull!" "Oh," shouted the old green grasshopper. "Everyone get behind me and pull." Well, there in front of him in this illustration, there was about a mile of string to be hauled on, but they all worked like mad, and in the end, over the side of the peach, there appeared a dripping wet James with a dripping red centipede clinging to him tightly with all 42 of his legs. "He saved me," gasped the centipede. "He swam around in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean until he found me." "My dear boy," the old green grasshopper said, patting James on the back, "I do congratulate you." "My boots!" cried the centipede. "Just look at my precious boots. They are ruined by the water." "Be quiet," the earthworm said. "You are lucky to be alive." "Are we still going up and up?" asked James. "We certainly are," answered the old green grasshopper, "and it's beginning to get dark." "I know. It'll soon be night." Why don't we all go down below and keep warm until tomorrow morning?" Miss Spider suggested. "No," the old green grasshopper said. "I think that would be very unwise. It would be safer if we all stay up here through the night and keep watch. Then if anything happens, we shall anyway be ready for it." To be continued.